Hi, and welcome to the lecture on chapter number 9, Problem Solving and Decision Making in Groups. This is one of the most practical chapters because we understand if we see small groups as a system, as with any machine, there's going to be a breakdown. Sometime or another, there's going to be a breakdown. So in this lecture, we're going to really blitz through many big terms. We're going to look at how groups and the group process facilitates problem solving. So let's start with some basic definitions of three keywords. Number one, problem. Problems are simply discrepancies between what should be happening and what's actually happening. Duh, Dr. Phil, I know what a problem is. Yeah, you do. But think about problems and how they're unique in small group communication interactions. Remember, we talked about the psychological complexity of small groups, the many different factors that individuals coming together to form one cohesive group unit present to communication encounters. So problems in small groups look a lot different. Thus, our mechanisms for problem solving in small groups must also look different. Problem solving refers to a comprehensive, multi-stage procedure for moving from a current unsatisfactory state to a desired goal and developing a plan for reaching the goal. What's a key element of this definition is that problem solving is multi-dimensional and it's a multi-stage procedure. It's not just one task that will fix everything. If there's a problem, not only do you need to fix it, you need to develop a plan to ensure that the problem doesn't arise again. There are multiple stages to this. And so when it comes to problem solving, often this is actually about decision making because there are many mechanisms of problem solving that we can choose from. They in and of themselves are not that complex, but where it becomes difficult is when we have to choose one over the other. So decision making is just choosing from a set of alternatives. So I want to move on and talk about some different problems that groups versus individuals face when it comes to problem solving and decision making. And I want to turn to the idea of the assembly effect. Now, the textbook defines the assembly effect as the decision of group members, and it refers to how it's collectively better, both qualitatively and quantitatively, than adding or averaging the individual judgments of the members in and of themselves. In our nation, we're ruled by governing authorities such as Congress and the House of Representatives. Those people are elected officials, and there are many of them. The idea of the assembly effect really would apply here because it says that the overall output of that group as a whole is much better, both in terms of numbers, quantitatively, and quality, or qualitatively, than if we were just to take each individual and what they were able to produce in terms of output and add it together. Remember, we saw this principle of non-summativity apply earlier in chapter 3. This is just an extension on that. So the role of problem solving in groups is actually key, and many groups are built simply to problem solve because of this very phenomena. That there's something about when we put people together, they're able to accomplish so much more than just a collection of individuals ever could. Now, the output of that group is really dependent on a variety of different factors, and we're going to look at two of those. Conjunctive tasks versus disjunctive tasks. Let's define each. A conjunctive task is a task where each member has relevant information, but no one member has all the information needed. Thus, a high level of coordination among members is necessary. And a disjunctive task is a task in which members work on parts of the group problem independently, with little or no coordination and group discussion needed. We don't really want to engage in disjunctive tasks, although it can be easy because you can divvy up the work and that's it. Conjunctive tasks are really effective because they require that some people have part of the puzzle, but the puzzle is only complete when the group comes together. Again, Congress, the House of Representatives, would be a good example here. Each member has their own unique information that's directly related to their party affiliation, their state affiliation, their own unique experiences, but in order for a law or a nationwide mandate to take place, each of those people has to bring that little piece of the puzzle into the greater picture. From here, we move on and recognize that this is the most functional. So the book talks about the functional perspective of group problem solving and decision making. And this is an actual theoretical model. The functional perspective is an approach to group problem solving that focuses on the necessary communicative functions of group members and how they must perform them for the group to do an effective job of problem solving and decision making. So these are actual communicative steps that groups can engage in to functionally ensure they're able to effectively problem solve. Step one, number one, all group members must fully understand the problem. So this is going to have to involve a necessary conversational component. All group members need to be on the same page and understand the problem largely in the same way. Step two, members must determine what minimal characteristics of any acceptable alternative must have. What's the bare minimum standard of change you are willing to accept? Everybody needs to be clear, because as we're pursuing that final end goal or the final outcome, we need to make sure that our ideas of where we should arrive are all the same. 3, they must determine what those relevant and realistic alternatives are, they being the members. So as you're analyzing any acceptable alternatives, plan for the worst. If we can't accomplish what we want to accomplish, what should we do? Have a backup plan. That's really what this functional perspective is about, having a backup plan. Then, those members must carefully examine all alternatives against the previously determined characteristics or the previously heralded solution to see how they all line up. So you want to ensure that you arrive at the best possible outcome, but if that's just not possible, where might you wind up? Think carefully about that. And then 5, they must select the alternative that seems most likely to have the characteristics needed. So again, they need to pick the solution that is most likely to accomplish what they need to accomplish. Now, in terms of functionality, there are also a host of vocabulary words that we see outlined in this chapter. And again, there's not really any exciting way to accomplish the delivery of this information. So I'm just going to kind of blitz through some of these key terms that you're going to need to know and want to know before the final exam. First, the textbook talks about the importance of a charge. This is a group's assignment or task, often given by a parent, organization, or individual. You know your charge this semester. I've given it to you. Our community partners have also reinforced that charge. That charge is very important, and it's a great thing to constantly remind your group of. As you get together, as you encounter problems, keep in mind your charge. What have you been commissioned to do? That is the center point of your group's identity. So don't let loose of that. Keep a strong hold on it. Make sure everybody constantly reiterates what your charge is. Now, you know you've been given some significant areas of freedom. This is the amount of authority and limitation you have. And I haven't given you many. Yes, there are some basic standards that you must accomplish. There are in any types of group work. There's going to be some latitude for you to be flexible and be creative. You know me, I always say, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Take some freedom. Know what those areas are, though, and don't compromise on areas where you don't have flexibility. As you encounter problems, keeping your charge in mind, ask questions about that problem itself. There are several different types of questions. These relate to some very fundamental questions of human communication that you've probably encountered in your public speaking class. Look at what types of questions you're encountering related to the problem. Questions of fact are those that ask whether something is true or if it's actually happened. Are people actually dissatisfied with the company's performance? You could set up a statistical poll that would indicate whether that is true or not. That looks at a question of fact and offers a fact-based solution that you can say yes or no, that is true or false. Questions of value. Those are questions that ask whether something is right. Is it good? Is it moral? Is it preferable? Is it acceptable? So do our employees prefer that we pay for dental insurance and take it out of their salaries? Or do they prefer to elect to pay for it themselves or not? That's a question of value. Is this a good policy or bad? Now, I say that that's a question of value. Some may argue it is a question, in fact, of policy that asks what course of action a group will take. Well, really, value questions asks if it's good or bad. So they can still concern themselves with policies, but it's focused on not the policy itself, but if something is good or bad. The solution end to that then is a question of policy. What should we do about it? People are dissatisfied with how expensive a dental plan is and how much money is coming out of their check. So questions of policy don't look at whether that's good or bad. They already have that understanding whether it's good or bad, in this case bad, and they say, okay, well, what will we do? What policy should we implement to solve this? And it could be that we choose to allow people to elect to have dental health coverage or not. And then there are questions of conjecture. These are questions that ask a group to speculate or make an educated guess about something. So we hear this a lot in some brainstorming sessions. If you had to guess, what do you think students really feel about this critical thinking initiative that we're implementing? These are speculations. In and of themselves, they're insufficient. However, they can prompt some critical conversation that can improve the morale of anybody that we're dealing with and help us solve our problems. Now, as we come up with a policy or a solution, we've got to look at the criteria. Remember, that was a crucial part here. What are the minimal criteria that we're willing to accept? Criteria are standards against which alternatives are evaluated. Does it increase happiness? Is it cost effective? Is it reasonable? Does it fit within the mission and vision of our country? Coming to those criteria can be difficult, but they're an important part of arriving at the answer. So as a group, how do we arrive at the answer or the solution? Well, we've got to ask, who's going to make that decision? Is it the leader? Is it going to be the leader who makes the decision, but they have some consultation from the group? Is it the group with or without the leader? Do we use majority decision, which is a decision often made by vote, where if more people say that should be the case, then that's the case? Is it by consensus, where it's a choice that all group members will agree that to the best of their abilities on one option? These are questions that we have to figure out, and we figure them out through the group process. Now, the textbook lists a different model. They list the phasic progression. This is built on a model that's similar to the model you see before you here, which is forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Although this is not in the textbook, I do expect you to be able to memorize these phases. I can assure you that this will be on an exam. So let's talk briefly about what these phases are. This is a multi-phase journey through group development. During the forming stage, the team acquaints and establishes themselves as a group. They establish some ground rules. So they're basically treating everybody like new members, almost like strangers. But as they work together and get more comfortable, they then go through the storming phase. So where they start to communicate openly and honestly, but they still don't quite see themselves as individuals. They still see themselves, as individuals, not quite as members of a team yet. They resist control, they don't want to be controlled, they don't want to be dominated. They may even show some hostility, but eventually people work that out. And then they go through the norming stage of group development. This is where people feel a part of the team and realize that they can achieve work if they accept other people's viewpoints. This is where the group process really begins to solidify. As the group solidifies, they then move into the performing stage. This is where the team works in an open and trusting atmosphere. That's not to suggest it's not without problems, but they work where flexibility, accommodation are key. And hierarchy, who cares? Who cares who the leader is? We're all here to perform this task. In the adjourning phase, the team conducts an assessment of the year or the semester or whatever period in which they've worked, and they implement a plan for transitioning roles and recognizing member contributions. You will adjourn at the end of the semester, but some groups are continuously ongoing, so that can look different no matter what. So as groups go through this process, there are again some key terms that fall into this model at varying places that I think we need to hit on, and we're going to blitz through these for the remainder of this lecture. The first is critical thinking. As students, you know that critical thinking is a highly sought after skill set in the workforce. It's also something that almost all institutions of higher education are required to instill within their students. We define critical thinking as the systematic examination of information and ideas on the basis of evidence and logic, not just on intuition, hunch, opinion, or judgment. In group problem solving, it's important to engage in critical thinking. And we're going to apply this concept in more depth in class more specifically, but critical thinking means that you don't just say, well, I feel this, and this. Your opinions matter, and you should share them. But those opinions should always be supported with something else. Evidence, logic. Talk about why those things matter beyond just your own personal beliefs. You may choose to use facts, which are verifiable observed events. These are descriptive statements that are just straight up true. Or you may choose to use an inference, which are statements that go beyond fact. They use facts as kind of a pivot point, but they involve some degree of uncertainty or probability. They can't necessarily be checked for accuracy by direct observation, but they're still rooted in logic. So what can we logically infer based on our own understandings? Can we infer that students are satisfied with their degree progress here? Are they satisfied with a certain program that we've implemented? That is an inference. Inferences and all opinions and methods of critical thinking need to be free of fallacy. Now, you've explored fallacies in depth in your public speaking course, so we're not going to look at those in depth here, but a fallacy is basically an error in reasoning. One of the major fallacies is overgeneralization, where we tend to think that something's just easily solvable, right? Well, this is the solution, duh, and that's it. Overgeneralizing, oversimplifying, making the assumption that because something is true about one or a few items, it's true for all of those items, is just patently and inherently false. Your textbook also notes some other types of logical fallacies, including ad hominem, false dilemma, faulty analogy. There are a host of others. Make sure you're familiar with what those are. Those will make a resurgence, but we're not going to look at those in depth here. Instead, we're going to talk and end on just some of the funky processes that groups may go through. Some of the communicative issues that emerge in problem solving in small groups that are particularly bound to small group contexts. The first is hidden profiles. And a hidden profile occurs when the information members hold inside collectively favors the best decision, but the information they hold in private as individuals favors a less effective solution. So groups, when they get together, they want to accomplish a task, right? I mean, that's what they've been commissioned to do. So as each member goes out and does their own thing or solves their own little part of the problem, they may encounter information that leads them to select or believe that another option other than the one that the group has chosen is the best solution. But because of issues related to the group, they choose to keep some of that information private because they want to be a good team player. They want to arrive at the best possible outcome. They want to do what the group was commissioned to do, so they hold some of that information inside. That can be very detrimental to the group because it doesn't put it all out on the table. And the actual implementation of what the group presumes to be the best possible outcome may indeed fall flat on its face based on that information that members hold in private. There's also a concept called group polarization, which is a unique conundrum for groups. This concept says that there is a tendency for people in a group to make decisions that are more extreme, maybe more risky, or perhaps more cautious than they would make individually. There's something about being part of a group entity that either makes us feel invincible or extra protective. Why that is, scholars have yet to figure out, but there's something about the power of numbers that shifts our thinking. But the big takeaway here is that we're more likely to approach problems differently in a group than we are individually, whether that's in a more risky way or a more cautious way. And then you've seen this term come up many times throughout the semester, but a crucial element of the small group communication process and in problem solving is the idea of groupthink. Now, groupthink, if you just see the word, it looks like it's a pretty good thing, right? Like groupthink, that's a good thing. We all want to think as a group. No, groupthink is bad. Groupthink is the tendency of some cohesive groups not to subject information, reasoning, and proposals to thorough critical analysis. This is, hey, let's get together. Somebody suggests a solution, and because we want to be steady as she goes, we want to be seen as good, valuable team members, we don't give our true opinions. Giving your opinions, arguing, finding areas to disagree is not only valuable, it's crucial to group success because it allows us to get all options on the table. We want to avoid groupthink at all costs. Again, you need to be cognizant of the interpersonal needs of the group. Sometimes it is important to compromise, although we, again, prefer collaboration over compromise. Sometimes you do need to validate others, but you can still validate others' ideas and input while also presenting other ideas and mechanisms of solving the problem at hand. Though this chapter is not particularly glossed up and full of fun graphics, such is the nature of problem solving in groups. It's not fun. It involves a lot of information, analysis, rigor, and the theoretical perspectives that lead us towards problem solving effectiveness in groups they're deep and they're hard to grasp. This chapter has been a rapid blitz through some of those concepts. Please make sure that you have read the chapter in full, that you have completed the study guide and are ready to apply these principles in action in class and on the final exam. I'm confident that you've already put some of these in action successfully. I've seen it with my own eyes. Problems occur in groups. Problems in and of themselves are not bad. It's how we address those problems that leads to good or bad outcomes. Hopefully now you have some of the keys in place to address these in an effective way that leads to the best possible outcome. I look forward to meeting with you and applying some of these in person. Again, submit that study guide, and as always, thank you for watching.